or our text for today. I think that one of the challenges of both of this year and putting this together of what to teach and what to learn this year is that this Seder is profoundly different from other Seders because we're going to be by ourselves, because all the stories that all of us were sharing before we started recording are about the people at our tables and the family that we have and the experience of a Seder as a communal meal. And that's not what this Seder is going to be this year. It's not a communal meal. It's not a series of stories and memories. I mean, it might be, you can have those conversations over, but it's a different Seder this year on two levels. One is the level that we just talked about, that you're doing it by yourself. So that means that Jewishly speaking, it's going to be more about the book and less about the people, right? So the process of being, and I just thought of this, the process of going up to read from Torah, or the process of going to synagogue, is that we all stand around and read from a book together, and that the people are part of the recitation, and the people are part of the dialogue of the prayer book or of the reading of Torah. And this year, it's not so much about the people, it's really about the recitation in the book, which is really stark on some level. That's very elevating because we're focusing on the core material, but on the flip side, it's not really how the Seder was meant to be. It's supposed to be a communal process. That's on some level nice when you're going to do a bunch of Hasidic teachings on the Haggadah, because the Haggadah, the Hasidic take on the Haggadah is that it is just like everything else in Hasidut, very personal, and you make it personal, and it's not necessarily about Uncle Morty and the fact that he would always smoke a cigar, and when Elijah was supposed to come in. The second piece that is more dark and more difficult to deal with, and I was struggling with this as I was trying to come up with a message for my congregation, is I'm tripping over the same parts of the Haggadah that are really difficult this year to bring to mind, because they are specifically about pandemic and quarantine and COVID-19, right? Like thinking about Makat Bechorot. I read almost a half a dozen Makat Bechorot, death of the firstborn child texts, trying to find something that would be interesting or meaningful or moving. And honestly, I kept hate reading them all. I would read them and be like, I was like very unlikely. I very much believed at the beginning, like, there's no way I'm going to find something that I don't hate. And when I started to read it, I was like, nope, hate this already. It's already talking about how God was the righteous judge in killing the firstborn. And this is the year where the death of the firstborn, every year feels weird with death of the firstborn, this year more so than any others. All the other plagues felt the same way. I read through a bunch of commentaries on the plagues and was like, I am not feeling this. This is not helping me. Looking at the kind of the basic idea of the Passover, of, shutting ourselves in our houses so that, the wickedness should pass over our houses, so that the plague should pass over our houses. I kept looking for a meaningful entry point into that. I'm sure there is one. I'm not enough of a rabbi to have found it, though. I could not find any entry point into it. So I found other entry points into this year's Passover Seder that I hope you'll find meaningful. So I brought two texts, and they're both, one's young and new, and one's older and a throwbacky one. So I'll share them with you right now, so you can throw them up on the screen, or if you printed it out already, that's great. Bear with me. That was a picture of a dwarf from Jeremy. So good thing he didn't send me, anything lurid or anything like that. So here we go. We've got,
bashful.
Yeah, was it bashful?
It's
Very
bashful.
Good. Very good. You know your dwarf. Okay. So this is, there's two lines in the Haggadah that we're going to be looking at today. The first is this one. In each and every generation, one is obligated to see themselves as if they personally went out from Egypt. You can see it in the Hebrew down below. It's the first line of
goofy.
our commentator here.
Bashful.
Yeah, we're still seeing bashful.
You're still seeing bashful? That's no good. We're closing bashful. Oh, I see. I see what happened here. I see what happened here. That's so funny. All right, let's try again. There we go. All right. I know what happened there.
We got it.
Terrible at this. That's pretty funny, though. It's pretty funny. Don't hear me that. Couldn't figure out how to do it, but I'm really glad he didn't send me anything inappropriate. Like a long thread complaining about his senior rabbi or something like that. Anyways, so in each and every generation, one is obligated to see themselves that they went out of personally from Egypt. So in Hebrew, this is the beginning of the Magid, and it says, Vehine b'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim. This is the Netivot Shalom, and the Netivot Shalom is Rabbi Sholom Nachum Berezhinsky, Sholom Noach Berezhinsky of Slonim. He lived from 1911 to the year 2000. And the Slonimer Hasidim were a big Hasidic sect outside of Vilna, and they were a very large Hasidic dynasty until the Holocaust, and then in the Holocaust, almost all of their followers were killed. The Slonimer Rebbe left Slonim in the 1930s and settled in Jerusalem in 1940 and started a yeshiva there. So all the Slonimer Hasidim live in either Jerusalem or Bnei Brak today, and his son is still the rabbi of Slonim today. They're not a very big Hasidic group, but his works were very well known. He's known as the Netivot Shalom. The pathways of peace would be a good translation of that. So he wrote this. Each and every year, the concept of redemption is reawoken. Rabbi Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl would say, were it not that the holiday of matzah came every single year, man would not become strengthened by the Holy One, blessed be. And the Torah says it was for God a night of vigil to bring them out of the land of Egypt. That same night is God's, one is for God, one of vigil for all the children of Israel throughout the ages. So the Netivot Shalom is going to comment on this. It specifies for all the ages, B'kol Dorot, and all the children of Israel, B'kol B'nai Yisrael, B'kol Matzav, and in any situation they were in, they were stirred that night to the concept of leaving Egypt. So he's really interested in this concept of in each and every generation, one is obligated to see themselves as if they went out from Egypt, right? It's this moment of reawakening. And for the Chernobyler, who Nachum, the Netivot Shalom is commenting on, this holiday is all about reawakening to the reality that God is present in our lives, and that we are being reawoken to our personal going out from Egypt. So that's not so radically different than the pshat itself from the in each and every generation we are to see ourselves. But there's some interesting little notes that he adds to this that I thought were worth mentioning. And they were stirred to the sudden awareness of the sublime greatness of God's love, that God loves us so much that God chose us and called us God's first children. Every misdeed is covered in love. And because of this, God frees all types of prisoners. So the Netivot Shalom is really interested in two concepts here that are special. And I'd say these are like reaching down concepts, right? Typically, we think of religious texts as trying to elevate us to being righteous and good, or addressing us as if we are all righteous and good individuals. But in this text, he talks about every misdeed is covered in love. So the original Hebrew of that, if I can find it, is I can't find it. Oh, v'al kol peshaim tekaseh ahava, right? So it's this idea that like, you don't have to be perfect or even good, that in each and every generation, God is reaching down to us to activate us and to remind us that we are free. And that this is a holiday that kind of reaches each and every Jew, b'kol matzah, but at any situation, right? This is an accessible holiday for anyone. There's no expectation of repentance or redemption that comes before it, right? And I think a neat idea off of that is, a lot of people go crazy cleaning their houses for Passover. A lot of people go crazy making sure their chametz is sold, or their chametz is, not present in their house. But this line, according to the Shlom Rabbi, means that Passover's for everyone. It's for the Jew who is barely aware of Judaism the other 364 days of the year, right? You sit down at the Seder, and we know this from our own personal Seders in past years, right? You have your uncle there. It's literally the only time he observes any aspect of Judaism because his mother called him and said, "You're going to be at my Seder table, and I'm not asking you twice," right? And that's how it is. That there's a great reaching down. The Shlom Rabbi brings it as, this is how God approaches the holiday, but we know it as, this is a reality that 85% or something like that, according to the 2013 Pew survey, 85% of Jews celebrate Passover in some way, right? Even if you just buy some matzah, or get some for free from Chabad, you're kind of doing this. Every misdeed is covered in love. Because of this, God frees all types of prisoners. This further concept of like, we are redeemed from slavery, at this point, that we are redeemed completely, in this moment, no matter how lowly or how disaffected we are from Judaism. So he continues, this night is the one opportunity of the year that the Holy One gives to the people Israel of uncovering the Shechinah. So the Shechinah, as we talked about before, is the divine presence of God, who is like immanent in the world. If you looked at the Kabbalistic tree and there was a top, the keter, and then there's all the like limbs down the side, and then there's the bottom. At the absolute bottom is something called Malchut or Shechinah. And that's God's emanation into our world, the presence of God that we feel in our daily lives, right? And that, according to the Shlom Rebbe, this night is because of the Kol Dor Vador in each and every generation, is our opportunity that God gives for us to kind of reveal the Shechinah, for God to be truly present. He continues that God brought scorn upon Egypt with the death of the firstborn and healed Israel and freed them with great haste. So he's doing this interesting move where he's juxtaposing the idea of the 10 plagues as, and I don't understand this fully, but I thought it was interesting considering our current situation. He kind of introduces the idea of the blood on the lintels, not so much as a protection or as a vaccine against whatever killed the Egyptians, but as a refui, as a healing. That God heals the Israelites from whatever malady or plague afflicted the Egyptians. And then he does a move that is present in the text itself, which is, just as the Egyptian firstborns received a plague, he's quoting God, I sanctified the firstborn Israelites with redemption. So he's talking about pidyon bichorot, right? Like the redemption of firstborns, or the whole concept of Bechorim, which is like the Torah is filled with these references to firstborns getting kind of special treatment or getting redeemed by the temple or by the priesthood or for God. So there's this midah keneged midah, this measure for measure idea that the firstborns of the Egyptians received punishment. The firstborns of the Israelites were set free. This kind of balancing of the cosmic scales, which I think you could look at with the critical eye and say that's problematic, especially this year. But there's this sort of understanding of, I think if we were to take it in a spiritual direction without taking it into a kind of historical dimension of talking about the Israelites and the Egyptians, that there are those who are blessed because of providence or luck or spirituality with going forward in the world as a firstborn who is uplifted, and there are others who will be brought low, either through fault of their own or through no fault of their own. And the final line of this is here. And from the force of the holiness of this holiday, the Jew is capable to continue their own redemption at whatever state that they are in, and they merit to depart the aspect of Egypt that they are stuck in with good acts and at a good hour. So this is kind of the core message. If you were going to put one line of this on your Passover bumper sticker for this year, it would be this. The holiday itself is so redemptive, right? The kol dor vador, that a Jew is capable of experiencing their own redemption at whatever level they're at. And you take yourself out of whatever, he called it a Shechinah, aspect of Egypt. And he's talking about a spiritual Egypt, not a literal Egypt. Whatever spiritual Egypt you're in, God gives you the power at Passover to take you out of it. And he adds, with good acts and at a good hour, right? Find the opportunity, find the moment to take yourself out. And then he kind of quotes the opening line of this whole Passover Megillah, no pun intended, for it is a night of vigil for all Israel in their generations to each generation, right? He's kind of saying, we make of this what we will in each and every generation. And to kind of cap off what I was saying before, in this generation, in this specific year, it looks different. It's going to feel a lot different. Thoughts, reflections, or as Jeremy likes to say, sermons, counter sermons. Anyone want to comment on what we saw there? Go ahead, Marilyn.
Of course I will. But again, it's just somewhat personal because this morning I sent off a Passover note, email, whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to think of the word to describe what it was, because it was actually a quote from part of the Haggadah and my own personal comment at the end. And I come from a family that covers the entire spectrum of observance and non-observance. And the interesting thing about this is that I'm getting emails back with interesting and self-reflective comments from the whole spectrum. You know, just getting the email from me, whether they were going to have Seder themselves or not, had them stop and think about Seder and about the passage that I had excerpted and respond to it. And so I think that I think that there's a lot of comfort in this particular rabbi that you've chosen to use. There's a lot of comfort that makes it possible for that full range, you know, of observance for people to feel connected, to feel like they're a part of it. And so I think there's a lot of truth in this one. This is one of the few that I have no challenge for.
I don't mind that.
And I know I liked it when you were reading it, but it struck me that I heard from my most observant sister-in-law and my least observant cousin within 20 seconds of each other.
It's great. Dee, Paula, Ilanit, you guys have any thoughts?
No. Yep, I'm rather thoughtless.
Ilanit's busy chopping potatoes, so it's okay. We this is like the holiest way to get ready.
All of the other lectures that I've been listening to while I've been castrating my kitchen didn't involve me participating. So, you know, I just have to listen and do my thing.
Right. It's all Torah and potatoes for Ilanit. Good. All right, we're going to do one more text. And this guy's one of my favorites. And he's one of Mike Werbo's favorites, Dee, and Paula. He is, me and Mike used to study this book together, actually, back in the day, although we still studied together. So this is Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berezhinsky, the Berezhinsky Rabbi. I always love him because he got fired from his first synagogue. You know, good rabbis get fired too. And he has a comment, as we're going to see when I share the screen, and it won't be bashful Or this time, I think, because I closed that window. Yes, you can all see it?
Yeah.
Great. So it's we're going to take a look at Hacham Mahu Omer. So the 4 children. What does the wise child say? We'll get to in the early-ish beginning part of the Magid service. And of course, we have these 4 children and their archetypes, or we talk about them as aspects of our own personal selves. But they're really interesting kind of meditations of like, why did the rabbis who composed the Haggadah decide that we needed to, kind of have these 4 children who are asking 4 questions, right? The number 4, probably most of you know, is often associated with God because the Hebrew name of God, the most powerful, most strong, most familiar one, Yud He Vav He, has 4 letters. So there are 4 cups, there are 4 children, there are 4 questions, right? There's a couple other 4s.
4 promises.
4 what?
Promises.
4 promises, very good. So Kedushat Levi is going to take a deep dive here on what is going on in this one. And it's really interesting because actually, to be honest, I kind of blew past this idea almost every year. I don't think I've ever really stopped to think about it, right? So what does the Chacham say, right? What does the wise child say? What are the statutes and the laws and the observances which Hashem, our God, has commanded to you, etc.? And then the last line that the Chacham says, I literally have never noticed. I've always just kind of blown through it and not paid attention. Or maybe I have, and I just forgot that I thought about this, which is the last line he says is, Ein maftirin achar ha-Pesach Afikoman. There is no additional eating after one eats the Afikoman of Pesach, right? If you go to a stark, frum, religious Passover Seder, after we eat Afikoman, the table is cleared, the kitchen is locked down, and no eating is to be had. If people are going to hang around, they're going to hang around. But the only thing you're going to get at that point is wine, right? You're not going to have dessert afterwards. And so Kedushat Levi is basically going to ask the question, what's going on here? Why is that such a critical idea for the Chacham? And why is that such an important statute law observance of this holiday? So he's going to obviously take this to a spiritual level. You can either take it for that and say, oh, this is the deeper meaning of Afikoman and matzah, take it on the spiritual level, or you can use this as a moment this year to decide that you're going to be extremely strict on not eating after you hide the Afikoman. For some of you, it sounds like you'll be hiding the Afikoman from yourself. So maybe hide the Afikoman now, start drinking heavily, and when you get to the second cup of wine, you'll be so blitzed that you won't remember where you put it, which personally for me, that makes more sense if I were to do it with my cell phone, my wallet, and my keys. More likely that I would lose those than the Afikoman. But anyways.
Your kids will find the Afikoman.
My kids are going to be we're going to do it the traditional way. My wife told me we were doing it this way. The kids are hiding the Afikoman, and we are finding it or not finding it for a ransom. So, oh well. I may have their grandfather hide the Afikoman in their house, which may not work. I don't know. All right. So anyways, so he's going to try and answer this question of what's going on with this no eating after the Afikoman business, and why is it connected to the wise child? In order to understand this, I said tricky question, the Hebrew is kasha, of the wise child. And to understand the relationship of the answer to the question, we must proceed with something. The word matzah and its primary principle is in its newness of the world, which is infinitely renewed. So this is a super cool move. And honestly, this is like my favorite thing for this Passover. And I learned it with Jeremy, I think a year ago, actually. So Kedushat Levi thinks that the core aspect of matzah is not normally what we think of it. So the 2 main reasons we believe in eating matzah in the Haggadah. One, it's the bread of haste, right? We didn't have time for the bread to rise, so we ate it quickly. 1. 2, it's the bread of affliction. It's lechem oni. It's poor people bread, and it reflects the spiritual poverty and lowness of going from gnut to shefa, going from lowliness to exaltedness. But here, the Kedushat Levi is introducing a totally different principle, which is that it's about, matzah is about newness. It's about rebirth and renewal. And so he says, God created it, both the world and matzah, from absolute nothingness, and brought it forth from the ein, which I translated as the nowhere or the nullification. So there's a Kabbalistic principle again, and this is Lurianic Kabbalah, of the kind of, that God on some level, since God is everywhere, and God is all powerful, there's a theological inversion that happens in Kabbalah, which is super fun, which is that God is the only thing in the universe that is capable of becoming nothing, of nothingness. And so that at some level, God is also the great nothing. And so when God created the universe and God created the world, God took something that is on the basis of physics impossible and made it possible, which is, we know from Einstein that matter can neither be created nor destroyed, right? It has to transform from matter to energy and energy to matter. And all of it was present at the beginning of the Big Bang. The exception to that rule is God, right? God is the thing that made all the matter in the universe and all the energy in the universe. And therefore, God can create energy and matter, whereas nothing else in the universe obeys that rule. And to this point, he's basically linking matzah. He's saying matzah is also this kind of particle that is created from nothingness. And he keeps going. The terminology of chametz is reflective of this, that in the phrase, and this is from Mechilta, do not ein machmitz hamitzvot, or ein machmitz hadinim, or ein machmitz et hamatzah, meaning don't leave it around. So there's this yin and yang aspect to matzah and chametz, of being and nullification. That chametz is a thing that we're going to nullify, and matzah is a thing that does not exist before the holiday, or at least the mitzvah of matzah does not exist before the holiday, right? If we eat matzah yesterday, it has no effect. If we eat matzah the 9th day of Pesach, there is no 9th day of Pesach, it does not exist. It fulfills no mitzvah. So it has like a non-essence to it. But then on Passover, it becomes a thing. It goes from nothingness to somethingness only over Passover, right? And that's the aspect, the nature of all time-bound commandments. The time-bound commandment can't be fulfilled except in its moment, right? It goes from nothingness to somethingness. I can build a sukkah in my backyard right now, but it fulfills no purpose right now. So anyways, he continues. So that aspect of going from nothing to something is how God made the world, right? God took nothing and turned it into something. We find that chametz, its core is a thing that is old, right? It has to ferment, right? It has to rise. It takes time. It's the process of slowness, right? If you're on Twitter right now, or even on Facebook, everybody is doing sourdough starters as their thing while they're in quarantine, because you have to be patient and you have to have time and you have to feed it. That's the experience here of chametz. That's the core aspect of chametz, is that it takes time. It's slow. You have to let it rise, and then you have to bake it. And matzah is the opposite, right? It's boom, bang, bim, go fast, right?
18 minutes.
And it's a thing that is new. What was that, Dee?
18 minutes.
18 minutes. If you go to 19 minutes, you got to throw the whole thing out. I learned something halachically this year that I did not know, which is why nobody makes, it's obvious now that Dee mentions it, but I never thought of it, why nobody makes matzah during Passover. And the answer is, if you make your matzah during Passover and you blow it, right, you go to minute 19, or even if you don't knead and bake all of the flour and the water together immediately, if you have even a little bit left over on your bowl or on your table, then you've made it chametz. Then you've created chametz in your kosher for Passover kitchen. So no sane human being would ever make matzah on the holiday. I had never thought of that, right? I'm 43 years old and it never occurred to me. Anyways, so he goes on. And this instructs us that the essence of the mitzvah of matzah is the renewal of the world, right? So he's bringing in this concept not of redemption here, but creation, that it reminds us of God creating the world. At each day and at every moment, right? L'chol yom ta'amid ma'aseh breshit, right? That's the thing we say in morning prayer. At each day and at every moment, God renews God's universe according to God's will, as God did with the going out of Egypt. As amazing as it was for God to do something supernatural, right? This is this constant Hasidic, Kabbalistic idea that God is constantly saying, I'm creating each moment. It's not just that God sustains the universe, but that God creates the universe at each and every second. It is as if God destroys the universe in a millisecond and then recreates all of the matter and everything in the universe at each and every second. And that kind of renewal and creation is being called out here at Passover. So he kind of concludes here, and just as this idea is made known clearly, that we should not move even our hands or our feet to do anything after the Afikoman, for in that one embraces the glory of God's name, may it be blessed and elevated. And there is what to be awe-filled with awe from on high of God's might and power, and to love God with a strong love as we come to see how God loves us with the universal love. I just love this. This is really poetic language. He doesn't really link up his idea clearly here because he goes 4 more paragraphs after this, which I didn't find particularly great, and gets into some weeds, starts to deal with a whole bunch of other concepts. Because the core idea is this. What is Afikoman? It's the last moment of eating matzah at a Seder, right? There's a moment early in the Seder where we eat some matzah, and it's a big deal. And then there's this final moment of the Passover Seder. We've had the big meal, we've drunk the wine, and now we've got our last little bit of matzah. And Kedushat Levi here is kind of highlighting this Afikoman and saying, like, savor it. Recognize what it is. This is something, this is proof that God created the universe on our own behalves. It's this physical, tangible presence of recreation, of renewal, of rebirth, of recreating the universe ex nihilo each and every moment that God creates. And that's a wonderful thing to take. You know, the first text we looked at, the Netivot Shalom, is kind of talking about the importance of personal redemption and you taking your own story of personal redemption. And this second text about why does the Chacham think it's so important to not eat anything after the matzah, and his understanding is because you have to recognize God's might, God's power, God's love in creating the universe at this moment and embodying it in the matzah, which is this kind of symbol of, you know, a new thing, a new special thing that is holy and sacred only for Passover. Thoughts? Anyone would like to share?
I mean, this is nothing I'm about to say is going to be original, but from another viewpoint of the idea of the Exodus as a continuation of creation. This is from another lecture I heard this week, but he brought in a bunch of texts about how Exodus paralleled creation, but his basic idea was when God created the world, right? What was the project of creation? Was pru urvu, right? You should go and like make more people, right? And then you should, I'm now kind of putting this into your hands, and your project as human beings is to kind of, you know, increase. And what was the, you know, the big problem what Pharaoh was doing? He was saying that Bnei Israel was getting too numerous, and that was, so it wasn't so much that like, he made it more universal and less about the Jewish people taking us out of Egypt, right? That the big problem that was happening in Egypt was somebody was saying that this idea of pru urvu was bad, right? The Jews were getting too numerous. So and that could be a universal thing as well. And so what the Exodus was God striking down against that idea in particular. And I mean, one of the texts he brought was like, after the crossing of the Red Sea, it says, that we have this also in Pesach, but you say like that it's Mitzrayim mate asfat hayam, that you don't have like the Egyptians that are dead on the side of the sea, right? It's Mitzrayim, it's Egypt itself. So what does Egypt represent? It's not oppressing the Jews, it's oppressing God's idea of that people need to kind of continue to create. So that's like another, I don't know if this wasn't what you're talking about, but it kind of reminded me about what you're talking about. Like this idea of Exodus as really kind of continuing the creation of the world. And so this is more like God fighting back against those who are trying to oppress the original idea of creation.
Anyone else? Thoughts? Counter sermons?
If you think about it, this Nisan is technically the first month of the year. So that's when you think of the first month of a year where everything's new. So again, you have the whole idea of newness, and you have spring, which is everything coming up fresh and new and back to life.
Right. And that's nice to connect it back to the other symbols, right? The egg on the Seder plate symbolizing renewal and rebirth, the spring karpas, the greens.
Uh-huh.
I think I had never thought of matzah as a symbol of renewal and rebirth. I'd always thought of it as, this is terrible. This is this drywall that we're eating. And it's meant to remind us of the suffering of slavery. But, Kedushat Levi is completely flipping the script and saying it doesn't have to be about that. It can be, three things at once symbolically, that it can be a symbol of something new and fresh and unique.
Right, you can look at Pesach as that.
Right. Any other thoughts? Awesome. I'm going to close the recording. Thank you all. Zis and Pesach.